Yesterday, August 29th, is commemorated as the International Day Against Nuclear Test, which has a goal to bring awareness regarding the harmful effects of testing nuclear weapons and also a call for an end to such kind of tests.
The first nuclear test, called Trinity, was conducted by the United States and New Mexico in the year 1945. The test gave the U.S. confidence to drop atomic bombs into Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 1945. The atomic bombs caused at least 200,000 casualties. During the Cold War, a total of 2,000 nuclear test explosions were conducted between 1945 to 1996. Since then, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was established by United Nations General Assembly. 170 nations signed the treaty but did not ratify it, while 11 nations did not sign the treaty.
A researcher from the Institute of International Studies of the University of Gadjah Mada, Yogyakarta, Indonesia, joined the Humanitarian Diplomacy for International Campaign, or ICAN, to abolish nuclear weapons. Now, experts, scientists, diplomats, and humanitarian organizations around the world are involved in the international movement. Back in 2017, the ICAN received Nobel Peace Prize as a recognition of their work to draw attention to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons. Joining us tonight on Asia Prime is Pak Muhadi Sugiono from the Institute of International Studies of the University of Gadjah Mada. Good evening, Pak Muhadi. Thank you for joining us. Now, Indonesia and other ASEAN member countries have yet to ratify the treaty on the prohibition on nuclear weapons. Tell us, what is the urgency of the treaty for the region?
Thank you. Good evening. This is quite interesting question and has been asked many times to me and to my colleagues who are working against the nuclear weapons. Southeast Asian countries are not developing nuclear weapons. They don't have a nuclear weapon. Why bother with nuclear weapons? The answer is simple. There are two answers. The first is nuclear weapons are basically a weapon of mass destruction, in which the impact of their use cannot easily be contained within particular or specific area. Even if the nuclear explosion or the nuclear war takes place outside Southeast Asia, the impact can directly or indirectly be felt or be perceived by Southeast Asian countries and the people. Direct impact can take the form of contamination, radiation, and so on and so on. The indirect impact will be because of the environmental degradation. So this means that nuclear weapons should be a concern for everyone. It should not be the concern only those who have nuclear weapons. And this has been the case for decades, in which nuclear weapon has only been maintained by the nuclear weapon states, and others don't care. And now the case is quite different. We are moving toward an international order in which non-nuclear weapon states are taking the driving seat. We are trying to regulate who should have a nuclear weapon, or that nuclear weapons should be eliminated. We should be the one who decide, not those who have the nuclear weapon. And the second argument why Southeast Asian countries are very important also to think about the nuclear prohibition is that even as early as 1970s, Southeast Asian countries has declared themselves as nuclear weapon-free zone. So in 1970s, we decided through the Bangkok Declaration, what's so-called ZONFEST, Southeast Asia Nuclear Free Zone. So actually, this is simply a logical consequence of the aspiration of Southeast Asian countries to be free from nuclear weapons.
Okay, speaking of Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia, with 270 million people strong, strategic location in the region. Tell us what would happen if Indonesia still will not ratify the treaty.
Well, it's a very pity if Indonesia does not ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, because nuclear disarmament disarmament in general is one of important pillar of the Indonesian foreign policy. Indonesia repeatedly and consistently called for nuclear disarmament since the very beginning of Indonesian existence in the international society. And Indonesia always involved in all negotiations, in all effort to limit the use of nuclear weapons, to ban nuclear testing, and so on and so on. And now the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is much more comprehensive legal framework, which gives a legal framework for the total elimination of nuclear weapons, which does not which is not served by the NPT, because the NPT still divides the world countries into two categories. The one, the countries with nuclear weapons, and the other countries without nuclear weapons. This means that nuclear weapons are seen as a legitimate weapon only by certain countries. But the TPNW, Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, does not recognize any country to have the legitimacy to own or to possess nuclear weapons, even let alone to use nuclear weapons. So if Indonesia does not ratify, Indonesia is not the state party in the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This means for me is Indonesia is punching below its weight in the international relations.
All right. So now, if most of the countries in the world have ratified the treaty, could it become a pressure factor for those nuclear power nations?
Of course, the reality now is that no nuclear weapon state will ever sign or even ratify the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. But should we stop our effort to regulate nuclear weapons? No, because as I mentioned before, this is the rule of the game. For more than 70 decades, the rule of the game in the nuclear disarmament has been set by nuclear weapon states. And now we are changing the rule of the game by making those who are not having nuclear weapons to set the rule of the game. And of course, you can ask about the impact of this rule to the nuclear weapon state. The campaigner of ICANN believes that, of course, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is not simply an international law which can force one country to do something or not to do something, because international law is only binding to those who ratify. If they are not signing or they are not ratifying, of course, they are not committed. They are not bound to obey them. But the political impact, because the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons will create a norm, a new international norm about who has the common aspiration to save humanity and those who are not serving the future of humanity. So there is no more apartheid in the possession of nuclear weapons. All countries should be committed to eliminate nuclear weapons to save the future of humankind and the future generation.
Muhadi Sugiono from the Institute of International Studies of the University of Gadjah Mada, Yogyakarta, Indonesia, sharing your viewpoints tonight on Asia Prime. Thank you, Pak Muhadi.